Hey everyone, it's Jesse Green here, and you're listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Have you ever wondered how it is that some people are able to perform at elite levels and consistently achieve high results? And have you ever wondered what those habits and behaviors are that set them apart? Well, in this episode of the Savvy Dentist podcast, we're going to unpack that and a whole lot more. And today I'm joined by Australian athlete Jacob Despard, who, of course, is one of Australia's Olympians from the Paris 2024 Games, where he competed in the 4x100 men's relay, where they set an Australian record, which is absolutely remarkable. So, Jacob, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
Oh, thank you. Very well. Happy to be here.
Mate, it's quite the remarkable journey. And I think anyone who's achieved such high levels of success as you have, going to the Olympics and representing your country, there's always an interesting backstory to that. And I've had the privilege to interview a few Olympians over the years, and every single one of them tell me it's never a straight line. And I'm curious to ask how that journey was for you growing up, being obviously very talented at athletics, getting to the Olympics. What were the twists? What were the turns? How did that unfold?
Yeah, it probably goes back to primary school. When I was a young cricketer, I thought I was going to be wearing the baggy green, playing for Australia, Boxing Day test, all those things. And, anyone who would ask me, that was my path. And I went through high school, played a number of sports, basketball, soccer, dabbled in footy a little bit, but ended up making the track and field team in year 7. And the school coach said, "You've got something here, come along to some training." And to be honest, I still didn't think that was what I was going to do. I was in love with cricket and did school athletics on the side. But in 2014, made the under-20 Australian team for track and field. And it kind of opened my eyes up to, there's other sports out there, and I had a natural talent in sprinting. So I tried to juggle both for a few years, and as I grew older, I just realized that if I wanted to make it, I had to make the decision to go all in. And so, eventually decided to give away the cricket and took up track and field full time, I guess.
It's a massive commitment of time, energy, effort. And I'm interested in the planning process because that early stage of 2014 when, someone saw something in you and they obviously invited you to join the team, and you obviously lit that spark by committing to it. I'm interested in about the planning process and how do you go from kind of teenage prodigy to Olympian? What do those plans look like? What's the level of commitment look like? And I guess for the context of this podcast, putting that into a business context as well, what does that look like? What are the lessons that you think that Olympians could teach business owners?
Yeah, definitely. I think the path wasn't straight, and it wasn't as clear cut as making an Australian team in 2014 and then all of a sudden becoming an Olympian. Between that, a number of setbacks. I stepped away from the sport for a year and just kind of tried to realign what I wanted and what I wanted to focus on. The Olympics is the pinnacle of track and field, but to get there, it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of planning, as you said. So I had that year off and realized that making the Olympics was something that I really wanted to do. And in 2017, I set some goals. I was a lot further back than where I should have been if I had continued from having that year off. So I had to really go back to the bare bones and put in a system that could allow me to hopefully reach my potential.
I'm curious to ask you about that. There's quite a few conversational threads I'd like to just explore there. And one of them is about the bare basics, going back to the foundations. When you've taken that year out, you probably, didn't train as much, or maybe you trained some, but not at all. I'm not sure. But when you got back on the track, where were you? Like, what did that feel like? Did it feel like second nature? Did it feel like a bit of a homecoming, or did it feel foreign? And you said you had to put a system in place. I'm curious to understand that system.
Yeah, I guess when I stepped on the track after I decided to commit, it was, I guess a word that comes to my mind is I was hungry. I'd been away for a year. I'd actually realized I missed this, and I was hungry for success. And one thing that I pride myself on now, I guess, is I still do those basics every session, week in, week out, because if the basics get slack, then it just rolls up the chain to the bigger things. So in terms of that, I was almost starting back where I had been when I left cricket and started running, to be honest. Obviously, I had the experience there, but the shape that the body was in and how fast I could run was back a little bit.
So those basics, as you said, they roll up the chain. And again, I can tell you, I'm neither a sprinter nor am I a cricketer for that matter. You're probably too young to remember a cricketer from India called Dilip Doshi, but he was my hero because he had a higher score of 5 and an average of 0.5. And I used to emulate him at, like, if I was in the same team as him, he'd still be batting above me, put it that way. So the point I want to ask is, what are those basics? And I want to linger on this point because in business, I think it's really important too, that sometimes as business owners, we can get ahead of ourselves and we get a level of success and we stop doing those basics. And I want to understand how to remain focused on those basics and not let them slip, because as you get back into shape and you start winning and you start achieving higher levels of success, it must be easy to lose sight of the things that helped you get there in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone who comes into track and field, they get taught how to warm up as a junior, the motor patterns that you need to learn through doing drills, warming up your body to a point where you feel like you can move fast. And so for me, those basics are executing the basic drills to the highest ability. I see a lot of guys around the mid-level, they've done their drills for years, so now they don't take them seriously. They muck around, they put half effort in, and then they wonder why that they're not improving to that next level, or why bad habits are creeping in. And I think that's a massive one that I had to learn a hard way. Was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was that guy. I was the guy who was doing my drills and not taking them seriously. And so an example is when you do your drills, having your arms nice and big and even, but I'd just put them by my side. And then all of a sudden that was transferring into how I was racing, and I wasn't running as fast. And so just making sure that things are being done. I guess to put that in a business aspect, it would be, those jobs that have to be done day in, day out, or every week, people probably might start to look over them, but they're important and they're there for a reason.
I was really fortunate enough to have had a few good mentors over the years, and one of them used to say to me, Jesse, never despise the lowest rungs on the ascent to greatness, and keeping to focus on those fundamentals and do them really, really well as you can, and the rest will often take care of itself. You did speak a little bit about setbacks, and when you took some time away, had there been a setback or an injury or something that led to that? What was the circumstances that led you to take a bit of a pause and a hiatus?
Yeah, I've had a lot of setbacks and a lot of things that I've had to overcome. Back in that time, for example, I'd gone to World Juniors in 2014. 2015, I transitioned to a senior athlete, relatively new to the sport, and really struggled not being a junior anymore, having to race senior athletes. I didn't really have any role models around me at the time who had made it further than I had. So I guess I just kind of got lost in a bit of no man's land. A lot of my friends were getting jobs and going off on their careers, and I was still trying to run, and unfortunately was not running well. So I stepped away from the sport, thought that was it, essentially. But then, when I came back, obviously things got a lot better. And then my next major setback was we missed the Tokyo Olympics by one spot as a relay team. So I'd been in the program for 2 years, training with a group of guys, and top 16 in the world get to go to the Olympics. And we were ranked high enough early on, and then slowly but surely got knocked back, and COVID came. We were supposed to go to Europe for a meet to qualify. We're top 8 qualified. Only the European countries went. They came top 8. We got knocked out. Just a bunch of things out of our control, to then be sitting at home watching Tokyo and watch them run slower than we could.
Oh,
it's a tough thing. I guess that whole time was tough for everyone in Australia, especially. But so I moved on from that, and then the focus went towards the Commonwealth Games in 2022 in Birmingham. And so again, we qualified. We were in the heat, and our last leg runner fell over before he got the baton. And so I'd missed out on Tokyo, put the wheels back on, made it to Birmingham for Com Games, and then got disqualified. And that's something that was out of my control. I ran the second leg. Ultimately, at the time, that was the best I'd ever ran in my life. For that 10 seconds before I saw our last runner go down, I was over the moon. And so to have the highest high 10 seconds later be, at the time, was my lowest low. Yeah, that was definitely an interesting feeling.
I want to talk about that because so much of that is out of your control. In fact, all of that, the Tokyo Olympics, not being able to get across to Europe to qualify, watching the runners at the Olympics run slower than your team could run. And then, of course, Birmingham, where the last runner stumbles over. How do you pick yourself up after? Because it is, as you say, high highs and low lows. And there's like years of dedication that go into just that one moment. And I'm curious to ask how you actually, as you say, put the wheels back on and
Yeah.
go again. Because obviously you did and you got to
Yeah.
Paris and that's great. But for people who might be dealing with setbacks and feeling like things out of their control are impacting them, how do you do that? Because sometimes dentists are control freaks, to be honest with you, Jake. Let's just face it. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
And so when things are outside of our control, we don't like that so much. But
Yeah.
life is like that sometimes.
Yeah. I think it comes back to the most simple saying where people say you can only control what you can control. I just remind myself of that, and failure is there and setbacks are there, and reflecting on those, I always give myself time to grieve, I guess the word would be, and to reflect and think, what if? Because if you bottle those up, it's never great. But then it's, all right, how do I grow from this? What do I learn? What's next? What systems can I put in place so that this potentially won't happen again? And even if, for me, there is really no system that I can put in place, but I can help the other boys so that we have, a better chance of nothing going wrong again. The speed we pass the baton at is over 40 kilometers an hour. We're running, we're not even looking at each other. There's so much trust, and the ability to do that and how we work as a team, the hours we put into training, all these things that we can do to make that the lowest chance possible of failure is things that we're putting in place now.
So you spoke about a really important topic, and that's trust in your teammates, right? You've spent goodness knows how many years training, running hard, probably sessions at the gym. In fact, I know you do sessions at the gym because I saw on Instagram you're doing something like, I was looking at this, you were squatting with like this barbell. It looked like you had 4 lots of 20 kilos on either side of the belt, then a band around that as well, just to increase the resistance a bit more. Like, those quads of yours must be super strong. My question though is not about your quads. My question is actually really about the trust that you place in your teammates, because really this is a team sport, but your Olympic dream is in the hands of 3 other teammates. And I wanted to ask you how it feels to have that much faith and trust in your teammates, and equally their faith and trust is in you as well. Their Olympic dream is in your hands as much as yours is in theirs. So how does that work?
Yeah, it's a huge thing. I think Australia especially have worked really hard on emphasizing that aspect of relays because it is so important. There's a marker from where you take off, and it's marked in feet, so you step it out. If you take off a step early or a step late, it's going to make that change very difficult, and the likelihood of it happening is quite low. So to have the trust that you're running into someone and they've taken off on time, it just comes down to repetition, I think, for us. We know we're putting in ourselves, and if the boys around us are putting in as well, you can tell who's doing the work and who's not, and the guys that are backing off. And then that's ultimately what builds the team. Now, we raced a few months ago, and it was with a bunch of new guys. They changed it up just to try a few things.
Yep.
The runners coming into me, I wasn't familiar with. We hadn't worked together very often. I was thinking, can this guy do it? Is he going to be able to catch me? When I was at the Olympics, at the Commonwealth Games, we'd done it that many times and had that much trust in each other. It was almost like I was just waking up and it was another day once we got out there. Because I knew how it was going to end up. I knew that I was going to take off on time. I knew that he was going to run up behind me, call arm at the right moment, pass it, and it was going to be sweet. It was a doubt in my mind because there was things in place to make us feel like that. There was systems in place, I guess the word is. We'd done the training. We knew that it was going to work. We had trust in each other. We're all there for each other. And so that's how it works at the top.
Okay, so this is really interesting. So just to unpack this a little bit, there's obviously a system in place, and then there's repetition, and of course a bit more repetition for good measure.
Yeah.
Because repetition being the mother of skill. And so I wanted to ask you, apart from the system and the repetition, do you actually talk about the trust that you have in each other? Do the 4 of you as a unit get together and have a heart-to-heart and say, hey, fellas, this is the big moment. What's that pre-race conversation like? Or even if it's not pre-race, but some other time, do you actually talk about the trust, or is it just assumed?
Yeah, definitely. We chat about it. The four guys, we usually have a little prep talk before the race as well. And I think by that stage, we all know that this is going to go well. And obviously, you can't 100% rule out that it's not going to, because we're humans and people make
Things can happen,
mistakes.
yeah.
The feeling is you're in a team, and that's something that for me, for example, I haven't felt since playing cricket. And so growing up playing team sport, I love that aspect. Relays are a highlight, although they do make me very nervous, because if something goes wrong and it's on me, it's not just myself that has to deal with it. So there is almost a higher expectation to perform when you're in that team.
How do you cope with that pressure, and especially in big moments? And I know you said it's just like running another day. Is it just simply the reps? Is it simply just doing it over and over and over, and it's just a different venue?
Yeah, I think a lot of visualization is how I help myself with that stuff. Before Paris, I knew that the stadium was sold out. I knew that there was going to be 80,000 people screaming. I knew that the pressure was going to be on, the media were going to be there. So before I'd even walked out, I'd lived that moment. I knew what to expect. I knew that when the gun went off, the crowd were going to be screaming. And so I had a plan that once I walked out into the stadium, I was going to look around, I was going to take it in, I was going to get it, fired up. I was going to let it be there. But then as soon as that gun went, it was me and the other three guys in that stadium, and I just shut everyone out. And I'd rehearsed that. And so when I got there, there was no, I hope this plan works. It was, I've done this before. Let's do it again.
I really love this, because I think this is super, super relevant for business owners as well. Is that planning, the repetition, the knowing that it's going to work, not just the fingers crossed and praying to the track and field gods that it's all going to happen the way it should happen, or in our case, the business gods, or whatever it is. So I really just want to emphasize that point for the listeners, because the repetition part is critical. The trust is obviously really critical, but the reps is what builds the trust, because then you've done it so many times over and over and over, and that visualization as well. I wanted to talk about the pressure though, because again, for business owners operating under that pressure, what other techniques would you have in your toolkit to help perhaps business owners who need to deal with pressure? What other things do you guys do as elite athletes that allow you to cope with that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is having clear, measurable goals.
Yeah.
Because if you've got, what's the pressure there for? Why is the pressure there? Whose expectation is causing the pressure? And so when you've got those goals written down, the expectations written down, it makes it a lot easier to actually understand where is this pressure coming from and who's in charge of it. Because we had this conversation prior to the Olympics, and my family and and they bought tickets to the Olympics before I'd qualified. And so talk about pressure.
Yeah.
I need qualified. And they're buying tickets. And so I sat them down and I said, look, I really want you to be there if I make it. I don't want the external pressure from you for me to make it. I'm just letting you know there's a chance I won't make it, because who knows what could happen. And so I just removed that from me, and because, I want to be there and I wanted to do it, but that was a pressure that I didn't need at the time, because I already had pressure of myself. And I think I really wanted to make it. So just controlling it. And once you do that and know where it's coming from, I think that's really when you can just have the power over it.
Yeah. And so at the Olympics, was there anything that kind of didn't go exactly according to that visualization or the mental imagery you'd taken yourself through?
Yeah, well, we didn't make the final. So
Okay, yeah.
that was disappointing, because we ran in the first heat. And when the first heat was drawn, there's two heats.
Yep.
One and heat two. The teams that I thought we were going to be up against in the final, they were all in our heat. So we had drawn a ridiculous heat. None of the other boys had caught on. So I spoke to the coach. I told him I wasn't going to say anything. He didn't say anything. He thought the same. But then we went out there and unfortunately came sixth in our heat. The top five in our heat made the final. And then we were ranked sixth overall when the next three in the next race went through. So that was something that completely out of our control. as I
Yeah.
spoke about before, my dream was to go to Paris and make the final. We should have done that. We were fast enough to do it, but then the seating didn't allow it.
Yeah.
So we broke the Australian record in the race.
I
We all
I
ran
heard.
incredibly well, executed perfectly. It's just something that you can't control.
I wanted to ask a bit about the goals that you set because you did talk about having clear, measurable goals. How does that translate short term versus long term? Obviously, setting an Olympic goal is a fairly long term aspiration. You would have set that goal some years previously, but on a day to day basis or a week to week basis, how does that translate into taking that big long term vision and making it practical, tangible today?
Yeah, I think a big thing is delayed gratification in that instance.
Yeah,
You know,
huge amount.
some of the small goals that you may not want to even think are goals are, and they're there for that bigger goal. For me, one of them was going to sleep early.
Yep.
It's so simple, but the effect of the central nervous system on sprinting and not getting enough sleep was something that I'd noted and realized. So, like a small term goal for me was try to be in bed by 9, do it every day, But then the next one is the goals of there's the progression to make the Olympics. I need to be the fastest man in Tasmania, or I need to be coming top 3 in Australia every race, and small things along the way. I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. But there was no real goal reward, but it was, in place. And I knew that once I was ticking those off, the progression would eventually end up at the Olympic Games.
So it sounds like you took that big goal and broke it down into smaller goals, progression goals, and then broke those down into kind of habits and behaviors, like bed by 9 o'clock kind of habits and behaviors. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. And I think
Yeah.
subconsciously, once you start doing that, then you're just adding other little things on that at the time you might not recognize that are actually directly relative to your goal.
Yeah.
But that's how it is. And I got to the point where I'd wake up every day, that 12 months leading into the games, I'd wake up every day and go, what am I doing today that is helping me get to the Olympics? And what am I doing that's not? And if there's something there that's not, I'm sorry, but it's not happening today.
And I think that's, I guess, having that really strong clarity of why that big picture goal is so important to you. I wanted to ask you about something because if you had not made the Olympics, for example, if you hadn't qualified, I know you'd already flagged that as a possibility with your family when they were buying the tickets to Paris ahead of schedule. What I wanted to ask you is how do you define failure and success? Because I think this is a really important topic as well, because to me, your athletics career is a success whether you make the Olympics or not, right? You're obviously performing at a super elite level that very few people ever reach, and that in and of itself is a massive achievement. But I wanted to ask you, if you had not reached the Olympics in Paris, how do you deal with that, and how do you define success? Because I think sometimes I have a daughter who's a gymnast and her definition of success is really absolute. And I'm just trying to encourage her to go, you know what, there's probably other ways to think about success as well. And I'm just curious about your definition of that.
Yeah, I think not making Paris, it's hard to say, to be honest. Yeah, even leading in, I was saying that stuff to my parents and my family, but I was making it. I was just making sure that I made it. So I think a common thing about all high achievers is they have a little bit of that, that dog in them, I guess you could say. And I told myself a few times, be prepared because it could happen. The team might not even make it at that stage. I was just in the relay team. And so I wasn't in an individual event. So it didn't come down to me. So the team needed to show up too. So I knew that was a possibility. And I guess I've tried to make peace with it. And I've had chats with people about becoming an Olympian doesn't define a success in the sport. And, you're so much more than that. But to me, becoming an Olympian was so much like about what I wanted. And it's just, I almost gave myself no option not to make it, to be honest, how hard I worked to get there. And I think if I didn't make it, I still would have been proud because I knew that I didn't leave anything out on the track to get there.
Yeah.
And in terms of success, it's a big question, isn't it? Because success means different things to so many people. Some people it's money, some people it's freedom, some people it's having a family, achieving goals, running fast. But I think what I've brought it down to is I feel like I'm a successful person and I'm enjoying my life. And I wouldn't say I have a stress-free life, but I have quite a low-stress life and I get to do the things I love. So for me, that's success.
And what's the future hold? Are you thinking about 28?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I wondered.
Yeah, I think just being in Paris, being around that many people, I don't know if you believe about energy and people's vibes.
I do.
But that village, man, was electric. The amount of energy and positive feeling just from being in that village was insane around all the people there trying to be the best version of themselves. And before Paris, I was a bit, we'll see what happens, how we go. Will I pursue another 4 years? It's a big commitment. And then, there was no question after. I want that feeling again. I want to be there. I want to go further and do better next time as well.
Well, mate, whatever happens, I think you can obviously hold your head up super high and be very proud of what you've achieved thus far, because it is a remarkable feat. Jacob, I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with us today. For those people who want to find out more about the speaking you do, because I know you do speak on this topic a lot, and probably the best place to find Jacob is on LinkedIn. So follow him there, check out the work that he's doing. And if you get the opportunity to go and listen to Jacob speak, I'd really encourage you to do that, or hire him to speak as well. Mate, any final words of advice for business owners that you'd want to share based on your experience as an athlete?
Yeah, I think just being honest with yourself and not talking yourself up to a level that you're not at yet. It doesn't have to be publicly, but to be successful, you have to have a lot of self-honesty and reflection. I think that's something that I've got really good at over the years, is admitting when I'm wrong to myself, learning what my flaws are. Without doing that, there's no growth. You get stuck in a circle of I'm doing everything right. And I think everyone can always improve on something. So that would be my last message. Yeah.
Okay.
Be honest with yourself.
I do have a follow-up question though, because you've just opened up a whole conversation thread in my brain. Sorry, mate. I can't let you go on that just yet.
That's all right.
I wanted to ask you, when you had a training session that didn't work out, did you ever have a training session where you walked away and in your heart of hearts, you thought, I probably phoned that one in. I didn't quite do as good as I could. Have you ever had that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I used to struggle with that. I used to think every single session, everything had to be perfect. And I've learned very quickly that consistency trumps that.
Yes.
And I actually have been told there's a rule of thirds. So to have great sessions, you have to have good sessions. And to have good sessions, you have to have bad sessions.
Right.
So that's something that I always remember. And as long as those bad sessions don't start to pile up on top of each other, I think as long as the consistency is there and there are still those great sessions and the good sessions, things that are good will come.
Mate, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate the consistency message is something that I think is relevant for every facet of life. Showing up when you don't feel like it, even when it's raining or it's cold or whatever it is. I think showing up regardless and putting in the yards is great. Jacob, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang with us, mate. You've been an absolute gem, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, sharing your insights. Ladies and gents, do go and find Jacob on LinkedIn and say g'day. And we look forward to seeing you around the traps, and we look forward to sharing your message further. Thank you, mate.
Awesome. No, thank you so much.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse here. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you're looking for some more tools, some more insights, some more inspiration to help you create a practice that you love, as well as a life that you love, well, head across to savvydentist.com and check out all the goodies that we have there waiting for you right now.